They skipped my wedding for a cruise. I found out from Facebook. My sister toasting. To real family. Just us. I didn't comment. I just cut them off from the joint trust account and prepared a surprise for later. 1 week later, my dad banged on my door, red-faced and panicked. I opened it, handed him a copy of the papers and said, "This is your new beginning. Without me." The next day, Dad got his lawyer involved. They didn't come to my wedding. Not my mom, not my dad, not my sister. Not a single one of them even texted the morning of. You'd think I'd done something to deserve it, hurt them, cut them out, or picked a fight. But I didn't. I'd spent months trying to make the day feel like a real family celebration. I wanted them there. I expected them there. Caroline and I had planned everything carefully. We kept it intimate, 60 guests, just enough for it to feel warm without turning into a show. She had her entire family fly in from California. Her uncle, who never flown more than once a decade, showed up in a wrinkled suit and cried halfway through the ceremony. Her dad gave the kind of toast you remember your whole life. I kept looking at the door until the moment I said, "I do," hoping for a last-minute miracle, some dramatic entrance. My mom running in with her hair still pinned up, apologizing, hugging me like the movies. It didn't happen. I got through the ceremony by focusing on Caroline's smile, trying to convince myself that maybe something serious had come up. Maybe there had been an emergency, but there hadn't been. For days after the wedding, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw it. My sister posted a boomerang video clinking glasses with my parents on the deck of a cruise ship. All three of them sun-kissed and grinning like they hadn't just missed the most important moment of my life. The caption said, "To real family. Just us. Just us." I stared at those words longer than I want to admit. There were likes from their friends' comments with laughing emojis. My dad had posted a few photos too. My mom had tagged some tropical location. None of them had said a single word to me, not even a message. Just a lazy little thumbs up on the wedding photo I'd posted. A like I didn't tell Caroline. I didn't even mention it out loud. I just stood up, walked into my home office, logged into the joint trust account, the one I had left open for them out of habit or maybe guilt, and cut them off completely. Access revoked. No warning, no explanation. I wasn't angry in the explosive yelling kind of way. It was quieter, deeper. It was betrayal, and I felt it in my stomach. All those years I spent helping them with bills, covering emergencies, managing the business so they wouldn't have to work late. And this is how they showed up for me. They didn't. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 1 week later, I heard pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding like someone was ready to break it down. I checked the camera. My dad's face red, collar stretched like he'd yanked on it too hard, sweat down his forehead. I opened the door just enough to hand him the folder I prepared days earlier. He looked confused, like he expected a hug or an argument, but not papers. "You're out," I said. "This is your new beginning without me." I shut the door. Inside that envelope were documents that officially removed him from the business. The last piece of shared ownership he had. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this for over a year. Every contract we signed, every filing, every adjustment, I'd been slowly untangling our partnership, moving everything into my name. He just hadn't noticed because he never bothered to check the fine print. The next morning I saw them again. My dad. And this time a man in a gray suit. Lawyer. No introduction, just a clipboard and a smirk. That's when the real fight began. He came back less than 24 hours after I handed him the envelope. Not alone this time. The guy with him had the kind of face that looked permanently bored. Lawyer, black folder, pressed shirt, zero personality. He walked straight up to my porch without saying a word, flipped it open, and started reading. Mr. Hudson is seeking restitution in the form of a 40% share of accumulated business revenue from fiscal years 2022 to present, citing verbal agreements and initial financial support. He said as if we were in a courtroom already. My dad just stood there, arms crossed like he'd won something, like this was a checkmate move. I could barely look at him without feeling like something inside me was rotting. "You think you built this?" I asked him finally. He opened his mouth, ready to launch into some recycled story he's told people a dozen times. How he gave me my start. How he believed in me when no one else did. How it was our company. He gave me 10 grand when I was 25. That's true. And he helped me land my first real contract. His friend's construction company needed a website and I stayed up 3 nights building it. But that was it. After that, I was the one grinding out 14-hour days, juggling 3 freelance jobs, figuring out taxes, branding, invoices. He stopped contributing after year 1, except when he wanted to brag about his company at barbecues. I never made him prove anything because I was raised to believe that when you're family, you don't keep score. But apparently he did. The lawyer kept talking, going on about verbal contracts, historical contributions, and some vague nonsense about legacy equity. I waited until he finished his script. Then I handed him a manila folder thicker than the one I gave my dad with everything. Transaction records, ownership transfers, meeting logs, every single decision I made in the past 3 years. I'd spent over a year making sure I was legally fireproof. You can go ahead and try, I said. But this business, it's mine. The lawyer flipped through the first few pages, frowned, and looked at my dad like he hadn't been told the full story. My dad didn't say anything. He didn't move, just kept his arms crossed, breathing like a furnace. They left without another word. That night, someone slashed the tires on my truck. I didn't need security footage to know it was him. It wasn't even subtle. The cuts were deep, deliberate, both rear tires. No note, no message, just a quiet threat. I replaced them without saying a word to anyone. The next night, someone dumped paint on the steps of the office. A full can, bright blue, dripping down like it was supposed to make a point. Then came the fake negative reviews on Google, all saying the same thing. Fraud, unprofessional, shady business practices, made-up names, all posted within hours of each other. And 2 days later, my office sign was gone. Not stolen, just shattered with splinters all over the sidewalk. Letters kicked in. Whoever did it didn't want to take anything. They wanted to humiliate me. I knew who it was, but I didn't call the cops. Not yet. That wasn't the kind of war I wanted to fight. Instead, I made a phone call. 9 months ago, when my sister got into that out-of-state university, my dad had called me in the middle of the night, said she couldn't afford it, said it would break the family if she had to drop out. I covered the tuition. Quietly, $15,000 so far, paid directly to the school through a standing arrangement. I called the university finance office. Effective immediately, I said, terminate any future payments associated with my account for her tuition. They said, okay. Asked no questions. An hour later, my dad tried to call. Then my mom, I didn't answer either. That same night, Caroline and I had dinner with her parents. I didn't say much, but I think they could tell something had shifted. Her dad pulled me aside at one point and said, "You know we've got your back, right?" I just nodded. It felt strange being supported by someone else's parents while cutting mine out of my life. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, it was quiet. No smashed glass. No vandalism. Just silence. Too quiet. The silence lasted exactly 3 days. No more slashed tires. No more fake complaints. No more lawyer calls. Just stillness. I kept waiting for the next move, but it didn't come the way I expected. There was no explosion, no ambush, just silence. And that's when I knew something had shifted. I was at my office early Thursday morning reviewing onboarding paperwork for a new client when my phone lit up with 7 missed calls. 4 from my dad, 2 from my mom, 1 from a random number I didn't recognize. I didn't pick up any of them. I figured if it was serious, they'd leave a voicemail. Only one did. My dad. I didn't listen to it. Then about 30 minutes later, the banging started. Not knocking, banging. I looked at the security feed. It was my mom. She was pounding on the glass front door of the office, already crying. I opened the door because I didn't want a scene in front of the staff. She pushed past me like she still had that right. She didn't even start with an apology. She went straight into panic. Tuition office, late notice, payment failure, academic probation. My sister had gotten an email that morning. Unless the bill was covered within 48 hours, she'd be locked out of her courses. The office had already frozen her schedule. She'd missed 2 deadlines for financial aid. She can't lose her place, Mike. That's what my mom said. Like I didn't already know that. Like I hadn't been the one quietly covering her tuition since the day she got accepted. All while they went on cruises, posted pictures of dinners I wasn't invited to, and talked about real family. I didn't say a single word while she cried in front of me. I didn't ask how she could toast the vacation while missing her only son's wedding. I didn't mention the smashed office sign or the truck tires or the fact that they hadn't called once. Not even to lie. I let her speak, and when she was done, I opened the door and stood aside so she could walk out. She paused like she expected me to say something, but I didn't know her closure. By the time I got home that night, I had another voicemail. This time I listened. It was my dad, and for the first time he wasn't angry. He was something else. He said things had gotten out of hand, that this was a family misunderstanding. He used the word overreaction twice. Then, like he couldn't help himself, he added, "You know she's just a kid, right? You're punishing her for something she had no control over, right? Except she raised her glass in that Facebook post. To real family, just us. She was 21. Old enough to know what she was doing. Old enough to skip my wedding. Old enough to enjoy the cruise I helped pay for while pretending I didn't exist." Then came the text. It was short. My sister finally reaching out for the first time in months. "Mom says you're not paying for school anymore. Is this really happening?" That was it. "No. How are you? No. Sorry. No. I miss you. Or I wish I'd been there." Just an invoice wrapped in a guilt trip. I typed 2 words and hit send. It is no answer. The next few days were quiet again, but in a different way. No more destruction. No more phone calls. No more surprise visits. Just nothing. I think they realized I wasn't bluffing. They'd expected a tantrum, something they could wait out, but I wasn't acting out of emotion. I was done. There's a difference. I saw my mom again 4 days later in the grocery store. She was alone, walking slow, like she had nowhere to be. We made eye contact for less than a second. She looked down. She didn't say a word. I walked past her. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. That was the moment it clicked. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They'd made a choice. And now they were finally starting to live with it. It wasn't guilt that came after the silence. It was desperation. By the end of the second week, I started hearing things. Not from them, from mutual friends, old neighbors, even an ex-coworker of my dad's. Whispers, people asking if everything was okay. If the rumors were true, that my dad had left the company, that my sister was dropping out of school, that something had happened at the wedding. One guy even asked me if I was sick. Apparently, they'd started spreading their version of the story, that I was ungrateful, that I'd shut them out after they missed one minor family event, that I'd gone behind my dad's back and stolen the business. The word stolen came up a lot. What they didn't know, what none of those people knew, was the paperwork, the emails, the months of silence before the wedding, the cruise, the champagne toast without me. No one ever sees the full picture. And I wasn't about to explain myself to every person who heard my mom crying in a grocery store. But something shifted again. They weren't trying to get back in anymore. They were trying to save face. And then the unexpected happened. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks after the last phone call, someone knocked on my front door. Not pounding, just one knock. I checked the camera and felt my chest tighten. It was my sister. She stood there alone, soaked, holding a folded-up umbrella and a backpack. I hadn't seen her in person since the week before the wedding, when she swore she couldn't wait to meet Caroline's family and told me she had nothing but time to help us with setup. Then she vanished. I opened the door and she didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, hair dripping, shoulders tense. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. "I'm not staying," she said, "but you should read this." She turned around and walked off before I could even respond. I watched her walk down the driveway and into a car I didn't recognize. Inside the envelope was a printed copy of her withdrawal letter to the university. A single page. She had officially dropped out. No dramatic message. No scribbled note. Just one line at the bottom, handwritten. I didn't know what they were planning. I just went along with it. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time staring at that letter. It was the first admission from anyone in that family that maybe, just maybe, they knew what they did. That they hadn't just forgotten, that it wasn't just bad timing. They made a choice. Later that night, Caroline found me outside standing in the yard. She asked if I was okay. I didn't answer directly. I told her about the envelope, about my sister, about the handwritten line. She said only one thing. You don't have to fix this. That stopped me. Because for the first time in my life, I believed it. I didn't have to play the peacemaker. I didn't have to fund their damage control. I didn't owe them a second chance just because we shared a name. And just like that, something inside me let go. After my sister left that envelope, I didn't hear from her again. No texts, no emails, nothing. I half expected her to reach out again. Maybe ask for help paying off whatever debt she racked up before withdrawing. But the silence held. It was different now though, less calculated, quieter, like they were finally starting to understand that the money, the access, the support, it was all gone. Caroline's family, on the other hand, stayed steady. Her mom called every few days to check in. Her dad invited me to lunch just to talk about how the business was going. I'd always felt a little out of place with them before the wedding, like I didn't fully belong. But after all this, it was clear they saw me. Not for what I'd lost, but for how I handled it. And then late one night, I got an email from a collections agency. It was addressed to my parents, but had been CC'd to an old business email I'd shut down months ago. One my dad must have used on a loan application. The message was blunt. Final warning. Over $40,000 owed. Something about renovations, personal credit, and a business line that didn't exist anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the attachment. But the next morning, I got a text from my mom. The first in nearly 3 weeks. Can we talk? Serious. I didn't answer. That afternoon, my dad showed up, not to my house this time, to one of the client job sites. He stood across the parking lot talking to one of my employees like they were old friends. I watched from the office window. When I stepped outside, he tried to smile like we were picking up from where we left off. You made your point, he said. But we've got bills now. I don't think you want your sister drowning in this. There it was again. The manipulation wrapped in concern, coated in guilt. I asked him one question. Are you still telling people I stole the company? He looked away, didn't answer. I nodded, walked back inside, and told my project manager to keep an eye on all company equipment just in case. Over the next week, things started falling apart for them. I heard from someone at my sister's old university that she'd been flagged for a housing debt. They were renting out rooms in their house again, something they hadn't done in over 10 years. My mom posted in a neighborhood Facebook group offering home-cooked meals to go for $12 a plate. And then a few days later, I heard the rumor that confirmed everything had hit bottom. My dad had taken a job as a night manager at a local auto parts store. The man who used to brag about our empire, who told everyone we were a legacy business, who skipped my wedding to toast himself on a cruise, now folding cardboard at 1 a.m. behind a counter. They lost everything. Not all at once. Piece by piece, just like they tried to do to me. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate, but I didn't help either. When it finally settled, the fallout, the silence, the debt, they stopped trying. No more calls. No more lawyers. No more drive-abys or messages through mutual friends. My parents were too busy trying to stay afloat. My sister vanished from social media completely. One day she was reposting dorm selfies. The next she was gone. I assumed she moved back home, though I didn't care enough to confirm. Caroline never asked for the details. She'd known something was wrong from the day she met them. My parents had barely acknowledged her. At the engagement dinner, they spent more time criticizing the venue than getting to know her family. Her mom still talks about how awkward it was. Caroline kept her distance through it all, not out of pettiness, but self-respect. She gave me space to deal with my family how I needed to. But after that final blow, the debt, the job, the unraveling, something shifted in her, too. She stopped walking around them like they were glass. One night, we were cleaning up after dinner at her parents' place. Her dad was telling a story about building his first house. And her mom was laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. I was just listening, watching. And then Caroline leaned in and said quietly, "This is what family feels like. That moment hit harder than I expected because she was right. Her family had shown up for the wedding, for the chaos after for me. They hadn't asked for anything in return. They didn't keep a tally. They didn't choose a vacation over my vows. They just showed up in mine. They lost the business, the money, the future they thought I owed them. They gambled on the assumption that I'd always forgive, always pay, always play the role of the responsible one. And when I didn't, when I finally held up a mirror to who they really were, they had nothing left to stand on. I didn't go back. I didn't reach out. Not when I heard they were renting out their basement. Not when someone told me my dad's car got repossessed. Not when my sister posted a vague quote on Instagram about lessons learned the hard way. And eventually they stopped being part of my life at all. Not dramatically, just completely. I sold the old office building, rebranded the company, invested in a new property with Caroline's father. He's officially part of the board now. Funny how life works. The man who once looked at me like a question mark is now the closest thing I've had to a father in years. Last week, Caroline and I sat down with her parents for dinner again. Her mom handed me a wrapped box. Inside was a photo of the four of us from the wedding, the one where I finally smiled like I meant it. Caroline leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "This is our beginning." And it was without them, but not alone. Never alone again. The first update. A month passed. The silence stretched long and hollow like an empty room no one wanted to walk into first. I figured that was it. They had made their bed. I wasn't expecting anyone to change. I had stopped checking my phone for missed calls. Life had moved on. Caroline and I were planning a short trip to the coast. Something simple to clear our heads before launching the company's new direction. And then out of nowhere I got an invitation. Not a message, not a phone call, an actual paper invitation in the mail. It was a dinner invite printed like a wedding rehearsal dinner or some community fundraiser. My full name was on it. Gold trim. No details about the occasion, just the time, a date, and the restaurant they used to take me to as a kid when my report cards were good. I showed it to Caroline. She asked if I wanted to go. I said no. Then I thought about it and said maybe. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I just wanted to hear what they'd say now that everything had come undone. So I went. It was just the three of them, my mom, my dad, and my sister. They were already seated when I arrived. And from the way they all stood up at once, you'd think we were shooting a commercial for Family Forgiveness Night. My mom hugged me like nothing had happened. My dad pulled out a chair. My sister smiled like it wasn't fake. We sat down, and for about 20 minutes it was almost normal. They asked about the business, about Caroline. My dad said he'd heard we were doing really well from someone at the country club. I let him talk. My sister said she was applying to a community college now, starting fresh. I nodded, and then the shift came. My mom brought up how hard this year has been for them. How everything spiraled so fast. How they made some mistakes but didn't deserve to be cut off like criminals. She started talking about how I always had it easier than they did. How I never understood what they gave up to help me get started. I let her finish. Then I looked straight at her and said, "You think this was easy for me?" That shut the table down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene, but I made it clear. You skipped my wedding. You toasted yourselves on a cruise while I said my vows without my family. You didn't call. You didn't send a message. You liked a Facebook photo. And then you tried to take back what you didn't earn. So no. This wasn't easy. Not at all. My dad shook his head slowly like I was being unfair. You don't have to keep punishing us, he said. Punishing. That was the word that finally made it clear. They still thought they were the victims. That they were owed something, that I was the one being cruel for finally standing up for myself. My sister sat back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes glossy like she was hurt by my words. Hurt. They had twisted everything in their heads. I pushed my chair back. No yelling, no storming off. I just stood up and said, "There's nothing left to talk about." And I walked out. No one followed me. Not this time. When I got home, Caroline didn't ask what happened. She saw my face, came over, and wrapped her arms around me. It was done for real this time. No more attempts, no more dinners, no more family who only knows how to show up when the money disappears.